Okay, so this presentation is going to be about how to use Teleport and VDI to connect to all these ECMWF systems. Then, of course, it's something that you need. It's a prerequisite to maybe following on any of the other training elements of the week. So it's important that all this gets done right, maybe at the end of the presentation, or not at the end of the presentation, at the end of this segment, or otherwise at the end of the day at least. So this the presentation has been written by Konstantin and with bits with Xavi. So I will be doing mainly the presenting it today. So first thing first, Teleport. This is the software we are using to connect to our systems through SSH. It's a software that replaces for this particular aspect, EC access that we're using to access all systems in Reading. This is basically a modern SSH jump host solution, which is a system that proxies. You connect through SSH to Teleport itself, and then Teleport proxies to the destination system, whichever that is selected in your command. It's role-based access, so it can be, of course, control fine tuned to which particular system you have access and not. And then it can be used to, as I said, to access either the HPCS or the ECS, what used to be the old ECGate system. One of the new things that it has, is if you compare it with EC access, is that you only have to authenticate once every 12 hours. No? If you remember, with EC access, you have to authenticate every single connection you were doing. Once this whole system is set up and the authentication done, you can run any SSH-based commands, SCP, without further authentication. One interesting use that you can do with this, of course, is if you have scripts yourself that do more than one thing, like SCP one file, then SSH and do one remote command, all these kind of things. Those can be done without authentication, and then of course can work as a script, which would not be possible with EC access in the same way. So as I said, it's compatible with all OpenSSH tools, initial ones, and then supports, again, based on SSH, all the X11 and port forwarding. It's something that you do. It's the standard. So the initial sign-in is normally done with TSH application, which you have to download. TSH is part of Teleport. And then you have a here. Let me see. And then after that, as I said, you just use normal SSH with everything. So the advantages of this system is that it's open source. I think it's written in the Go language, if I'm not too mistaken. Then it's very portable in work. It works on Mac, on Linux, also on Windows, and it has minimal dependencies once it gets installed. It can be installed also as a separate. You can have a global system installation or just a standalone for you if you don't have administration privileges. Then one thing to keep in mind right now is something this because we are trying to fix, but there's a version 14 of Teleport. And that one doesn't work yet with our servers. The thing is, there's some change in the protocol, and if you try a version 14, it will tell you that the server is not compatible. So you need to, please download version 13, and we will definitely tell you once we have all the servers ready to accept version 14. So the command for authentication, as you can see then in this slide, is TSH logging -- proxy equals jump ECMWF.int, which is our Teleport server. So if you have logged already once, then you only have to say TSH logging because the command remembers the last proxy you used. So first time TSH logging -- proxy. All the following times that you're logging is just TSH logging, and it will use by default that one. That should be a bit shorter command. So the login step uses port 80 and 443 for server login, and it obtains the client certificate from the remote server. It connects the jump server on our side. If you want to see in detail what it is doing, it's of course, I mean, it's not something you need to be concerned about if it is working correctly, but it's just maybe for information. You can use the minus debug option. This is useful, for example, if things are not working for you, because you can send us this full output. You can try the TSH login minus debug. You will get like a list of steps it's trying to do, and then maybe the errors, and that's very useful for us and to try to debug it. What it does is start an HTTP client on your side, listening localhost in a high port, and then it waits for the callback from Jump from the browser directly to that, and then that's the way to establish the authentication. In order to log in, you need two things. The first, to be logged in with your user ID in your normal ECMWF user ID that you can use. It can be the short one, could be a long one with the email. I think you can do actually with the email in either case, no, but all should work. No? And then it will ask you for the TOTP, no? This time-based one-time password. We need both things. It's a multiple factor authentication. Then, yeah, as I said, you get the callback, so you get a certificate, and then, yeah, it lasts for 12 hours. No? Then to connect, of course, to our services, it uses the standard 22 port, as you so that's the default for all the SSH services. So basically, that means that you don't need to specify any additional port or anything when you do this outgoing connections. This is what you see normally. I think don't worry too much about it. This is the config file here and all that, but don't worry too much about this. It's just maybe read for reference. But it's the top listing is what you would see normally after a connection is successful. You will get that. The second bit is the SSH configuration command you have to write. That's of course all in the documentation, and but maybe I'll go through it just to maybe tell you what it is for. But it's again, you don't need to be too concerned. Just have to copy it. So see, the first line is just the configuration for Jump, and then for all other servers. But this specifies the user ID that you will use to connect to the remote system. Then the identity file and the certificate file. That's what SSH will work in your local file system, and it's telling SSH, okay, use that to authenticate. It adds some host key algorithms. This is necessary because in our server, we are allowing some older SSH protocols. And of course, some SSH clients don't like that. No? Because say, okay, I'm connecting to a server that is allowing older protocols. So that's unsafe, and I don't like it. So some clients would, if they're very new, they would just say no. SSH clients. So in this case, but we decided we need to allow them precisely to allow the opposite. No? If someone is coming with an old SSH client that doesn't accept the newer protocols, that they wouldn't have any way of logging in. So we decided maybe to allow for some time. This will be, of course, disabled at some point in the future when we see that really there aren't many older SSH clients around left. But and then just the last lines are just to specify the server alive interval, so that your communications don't time out. So that, of course, is something you can change, or you can even remove. It will be fine. No, but with these settings, is to keep the connections going at least till the logging expires, which at that point, of course, everything will be the 12-hour point. The last line is just to say, okay, so we are to access all these servers. Could be a question mark start, or could be A, B, A, C, A, D, or the different basically complexes of the computer hall, or anything which is HPC star, like HPC login, or ECS star, like could be so for all those, use Jump is in the left client. So your configuration, which is in the, of course, in the documentation, something you will have to do and later to connect it, will be very similar to this, only with the change that you will need to put your own username instead of where it says username, and your email address. And also this line which says certificate file, it says user and address. We need to replace that bit, and then should be set to use the system. It needs to be the email address, of course, that you used to register originally with us. That is associated to that user name that is put in there. Okay, so then once all this is set up, if you want to access the Atos system, you just need to run in your own system after doing the TSH logging, your own laptop, your own desktop, whatever system you use. You need to do SSH HPC logging, and that will already give you a session with your user ID because you have it in the config file, of course. So we tell you, it will give you already a session and open, just that. If you don't have access to the HPC, but have access to ECGate ECS, so then you need to do this other command, SSH, ECS logging. Of course, if you only have access to ECS and try HPC, it would probably just kick you out. So you need to make sure that you have access to both systems, both would work, but of course, we recommend you to use the HPC one. Yes, of course, the jump host is also possible to specify as in the command line, but I mean, if you have the config file as we specified, there's no need for that. Okay, so then we have a demo now. It's a video, so that of course it's easier to show. In this case, it will show how the process for installing in a Linux system, installing Teleport would work in a Linux system. So that's going. So first thing, you go to the documentation page, and we have a specific link here to the how to do this. So that's of course the first thing going. You have this video even there. So we recommend you to go to the Teleport website. There are many ways of installing this. No? This is in some cases you can even do with RPM packages, dep packages, all this kind of thing. This is a way that we tried and works, but of course, I mean, anything that works for you will be fine. So in this case, basically use curl to download, copy and paste this command here. Curl would download this installer, and then you use bash basically to execute the installer. It's nothing particularly. And after you've done that, you got the TSH command with version. It tells you what version it is. As we said, we really it needs to be really 13 or over, because otherwise. And then after the command is there, you just do the TSH logging minus proxy. Okay, so you see in this case we were already logged in the website with user ID and password. So then it only sends us to the TOTP, because the other thing was already done. Okay, so this is the user ID, and in this case we're using US9 with a password which is us.induction@ecmwf.int, and we see how it's valid for 12 hours minus a couple of minutes, which is when we log in. Okay, so now for the next steps, which would be configuring. This is the config file that I mentioned to you before. It's perfectly spelled there in the documentation. So what we are going to do is to create a config file, or create first the .ssh directory if you don't have it already. If you already have it, then it's not needed. This, of course, all this side is done in basically your desktop, your laptop, whatever is your local system. So just copy and paste all this. Now replace the user by an actual username that you would use then also to, that's the Unix username that you will use in the system. Then replace the user ID, sorry, the email address. This needs to be done very precisely, because of course there's any misspelling, the thing won't work. And also sometimes careful when doing the copy and paste that is not no additional spaces or things like that, which those can of course upset a bit the config files. So it's something that it's a bit, of course, it's a bit of work to do this, but once it's done, this is just nothing needs to be changed. So we just okay. So now we try then after this to do just SSH to HPC login. At the first time, we'll ask you because it doesn't know the remote server. So we'll ask you, do you trust this? You have to say yes. And that's it. Then you get the session. In this case, will be AD. So the session may happen to AA, AD, AC, AD. No, that depends on what is where HPC logging is being set at that particular times, so it could be any of them. But in the end, of course, you have the same. This is ECS, same thing for ECS. Let's go to the end of the video, which is I think is just now anyway. Okay, let's continue then. Yeah, under Windows we have this. The process is very similar. The only thing that is slightly different is the way you install the client. There's I think it's also in the website. You have this. Then we have a video also for Windows, so you can see it very simply. So it's the only thing to make sure that's because I think for the Windows they offer both the Teleport Connect and TSH client. So we only really need the TSH client, nothing else. Then we'll get a zip file. They need to download, open the folder, and then drag it wherever you want. That could be, of course, your home file system for your user. I think that's completely up to you. The only thing then is to set the path so that the teleport directory is in the path, so that you can find the TSH command. Otherwise, you could put, of course, the full path, but it's going to be less comfortable to use, because the TSH command is the one you have to use, of course, every day when you are establishing the session. So here, it's the same thing. It's the Windows video. So it's again documentation. Yeah, so there's of course different options here. If you use PowerShell, if you use Cwin, and all this, but and this is the one, the most common one, I would say. So you go again to the this one, Teleport Connect. You select the TSH client, and it downloads the right binary for your platform. And okay, send the downloads. You can then move it to wherever you want, which could be your users, your home directory and users demo, in this case. Okay, and then the next step, would be to just set the path, I guess. And then you get the Windows terminal. Execute. And now the TSH command should be available. Yeah, it remembers, of course, all during the session the values of the path. Now the command will be exactly the same as in Linux. And again, because we were already authenticated with the user ID and password, so we had the first authentication factor. We need to then, of course, run the second authentication factor, which is the TOTP. And after that, this step will be really the same. So I think I will maybe move it a bit forward, because it's really the regarding the config file will be exactly the same as for Windows, as for Linux. We need to make sure that the paths are right. And so as well, let's follow because the paths may be slightly different. So that we want to see. Okay, so as again, the .ssh file may not exist. So we need to create it if it doesn't. This .ssh really is on your home file system. That's the default for the SSH configuration, always. Of course, you could pass a parameter to the SSH command to use a different config file, but normally I think this is pretty standard to use the default config file on your .ssh under your home. Yes, again, same. This case, it's important to see that the paths are right. Something that some people have some mistake with this second path, that it ends in -SSH. You need to keep that, of course, not just replace in that cert file parameter is just as it is, only replace the email address, but keeping the -SSH at the end. Okay, so you save it then as config. And that should be. And now things should be just the same as the for again the same thing. You will see this message because it's the first time it's connecting, so that's another remote server. Okay, so that's it. Simple one. For Mac, I think it's really the same one as Linux. So it's maybe here something we should maybe comment is that if you use Brew, that's an option code. You can download the client from the website. In that case, you know precisely which version you're using. You use Brew, I believe at this point is already offering version 14. So that of course is not going to work. Something you can do in Brew, you can have do Brew install, name of the package, and then add some symbol and a number of a version. I think it's 13.1 if I'm not too mistaken. You need to do 13.1.0, whichever is the latest 13 that is available, and that you can do with an add symbol. Otherwise, of course, there's always the option of installing via the website as shown here. And here I'm going to go really fast because it's really exactly the same. There's no big difference. See, here's doing Brew install Teleport. That's the one option for installation. And then the rest is really going to be exactly the same as in Linux. So the login, and then doing TSH login minus proxy, and then setting the config file in your home, which in this case would be normally /users. Then username on a Mac is normally that's the standard thing. Setting the config file, taking it from the example, which is exactly the same example as in Linux. Replace your email address and the username, and that's it in the end. Again, the same authentication. That's done. Okay, so yeah. So that's basically how to do it. Hope maybe some of you have already done it in the past. In that case, of course, at least maybe it's not that interesting for you, but for anyone else. Then, forgot to mention, we have all this documentation set that in Confluence in the user documentation space. So we hope, of course, if you have any problem, since it will be the first port of call to check really your configuration to see it's exactly the same. At least for the main parameters, you may have some additional parameters for other things you want to do, but of course, at least the core of the configuration needs to be that. You see that for Windows, we have 4 different configurations because we have users using the using the terminal and PowerShell, which what we show. We have some suggestions. This is not something that we can support extremely well, but so we have reports of users successfully using this other MobaX term or Sigwing or the subsystem for Linux. Those things also, for some users, it has worked fine. But I think then what we can say is that most of our users use either Mac or Linux. So that's really the configurations which we have the greatest experience with, and we have seen that they work better. Next thing is the VDI service. This is, of course, the other way. I think Paul already, of course, introduced all these 2 things. Is the other way of accessing our systems. The way all this was designed is we thought that for most users, Teleport would be enough. If you just want to run command line commands, submit jobs, edit files, things like this, really VDI probably should be the first port of call for you. However, in the past, we did have quite a number of users that were using the NX service. No? If you remember it, that would give you like a desktop, visual desktop, which you could run any kind of visual commands or even open terminals there. That was also possible. This is not supported anymore in Bologna, but an equivalent for people who really want to run GUI, basically visual window-based programs like ECMWF UI, MetView, or any other thing you can imagine, you know, view charts, things like that. Then we do offer the VDI as an equivalent thing. So this is, of course, available to all the computing users. I think we have limited resources, so it's something that, of course, we not recommend to use as it's maybe the main thing. Of course, if you need it, please use it. No? But if you really don't, you're using just a terminal, maybe use Teleport, which is a lot lighter for resource usage. Yeah, so VDI stands for Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. So that's something provided by VMware. Of course, it's vendors of general virtual things. So it's, yeah, as I said, provides a virtual desktop environment, allowing users to access applications, data, and resources without being tied to a physical workstation at the ECMWF location. We also use it internally for some things. Some people also internally prefers to use this, some others prefers to use Teleport, but depends a bit on what you do. Yeah, it's just you don't really require an internet connection because it's accessible directly. You don't need any special network or anything. And yeah, it always gives you consistent environment, regardless if you're accessing from a Linux system, from a Windows, or from a Mac. Yeah, this system prioritizes security, of course, with anything that gives access. Of course, security is always the main thing. And then it's the only thing that is transferred from your VDI system to the data center is just the screen updates. Well, I think it's the same with all these remote desktop systems. No? You send basically keyboard commands and movements and clicks over, and then the system remotely just updates your screen, just sends whatever changes graphically. This is different, for example, to an X system, no, which sends commands back and forth. But this, no, it's just basically screen-based, no? And basically like image-based. No? There's no specific yeah, knowledge about Windows or anything sent back and forth. No? So this is, as Paul said, is located just next to the HPC in the data center in Bologna. So of course, any transfer that you may need to do from one system or the other are really fast now. They share something that I'll say later on, but the home and the parent file systems are shared between the VDI and the HPC. No? So if, of course, you can do anything. But the HPC parent scratch aren't. They are cluster file systems and are only accessible from the Atos HPC. No? So normally, yeah, the steps to connect. This would be relatively simple, straightforward. I think some people have some problems, but in general, I think it's a lot simpler to set up than Teleport. You just need to install a VMware Horizon client that you can download from the VMware website, and then set desktop ECMWF.int as the server. Then you will get redirected to a browser where you have to, again, if you don't have the login, you will need to put first your email or user ID and password, and then they will ask you for the TOTP, for the token code to log in. And then after that, the browser will ask you if you're allowing the browser to redirect you to the application back. You need to say yes there, because otherwise nothing will happen. And then it's just it will pop up. Yeah, so it's of course once you connect to the VDI the first time, it will take a bit of time while it creates the virtual machine. But then once it is created, if you don't use it for, I don't remember how was this, maybe 30 minutes or maybe a bit less, don't remember exactly, but it will lock itself. So at that point, you need to, of course, press any key at that point and then write your password again, and it will unlock you and it will send you back to the session. I think the session will last, I believe, I think it's 5 days. So after that, it will be killed automatically. So there's a maximum. I think we wanted to so that it's really last over a weekend. For example, you're working all week, it will keep working, and then if you stop for a weekend, it will still work on Monday. But if you wait for a longer time, it will be killed automatically just to save resources from our side. You can always, of course, log out, and if you log out, then of course that kills the VM, so you will get a new one the next time. But the difference, of course, between the same VM or not is that your windows remain open or not. Of course, you start from scratch, so your windows will be just as killed too. So I think, as Paul mentioned already, you have this activities manager, which I know for any. This is, of course, this is a Red Hat system, so it uses the GNOME virtual, the desktop. So it's just anyone familiar with that. I think it's also used by Ubuntu and many other distributions. So you have this activities manager at the top left, where you can basically look for applications, terminals, the web browser if you need it, and other things. But I think by default, by the design, we decided to have really very limited software in the VDI itself. The thing is, of course, it's a machine that the VM itself doesn't have a lot of resources. So you try to do things which require memory and CPU, it's not going to run very well. So we decided just not to have lots of things there that may lead to people having heavy workloads, and then of course not being enough resources. And so the idea is, as Paul said, is you work by going there, then SSHing into the HPC with HPC login, and then after you do that, then you just remote display back on which the display variable will be set by default already back. So then you can display, but basically all the CPU heavy things should be done in the HPC. Next thing is, as I say, yes, yeah, as I say, and we also have the interactive command that you can search in the documentation. That's also to create some longer persistent sessions in the HPC, and then access from here. So yeah, so that will show how to connect. This is another video. So sorry if someone cannot see it. Again, to go to the documentation, so it's to the starting point. User. Then yeah, here you find how to download it. You need, of course, to pick the right architecture and system. In this case, we say it's Linux. So normally they still have a 32-bit Linux, but I don't think many people has now any 32-bit Linux anymore. So then you download it. This settings, then it. You will see when you go to the downloads directory, if that's where you download it. I think we'll get to the point where we open the terminal. I think make it a bit confusing here. Here we are basically in your own Linux system. The thing is that, of course, the VDI will look very similar because it also uses the same GNOME desktop environment. So, but of course, they're completely different. This is your system, your own. Here you change the permissions to make executable this bundable, and then you try, but then it tells you, oh, I cannot do it because it needs root permissions. Okay, then do sudo, do the same thing, and then eventually installs. Okay, that's done. So then now we look for the command. It's called, there you go, VMware Horizon Client. That's the name of the, and then in this case, we already have a server set, but otherwise you just say new server. Yeah, like this. And then, so then it will try to authenticate, and it will send you to the browser. In the browser, again, in this case, we were already logged in with US9, so we are not showing that step. But of course, even being logged in, okay, and that's it. So then now we'll send you back to this, to the application. And here you will see the type. If you have more than one type of virtual machine that you could do, you would see more options, but you only see one. So this is the one. It's called ECMWF desktop for external users. And then you get to this screen. You need to pick, or otherwise you have another option. Let me go back a bit because it went a bit too fast. So if of course, the user ID is unlikely to be listed here when you start, so you need to use not listed, the other option below. you have to pick that one, not listed. And then you also can type your own user ID. So something to keep in mind here is that the desktop, so I will stop it, that the keyboard may, that the keyboard is set at this particular point in time is here the EN1, which I believe is the US English. So if your password has any additional characters, which and it should, because of course we are now demanding people to put any kind of special characters in the password. No? So that can be a bit of an issue. No? You have a keyboard which is very different from the American US one. No? So in this case, I think you can click on this drop-down option, and we have more options of keyboards. I think we're working on putting really a longer list. I think at the moment we have 5 or 6. So you can try to pick which one is the closest ones to you and use that as and then of course that will help you just to type the right password. But something to keep in mind, because some people tries it and then of course the password is not right. That's it's difficult to check because you only see dots instead of the actual characters. No? But it's anyway, I hope that everyone finds the right way. So once that is done, it's just this can take a bit. In this case, it's relatively fast, but it can take a bit. Can take a few seconds to get you. And this is then the desktop. You see, you click on activities, you get these applications. Normally, most people use the terminal. Then in this terminal, just the next step, of course, would be to SSH to HPC, normally HPC login. Yeah, so something it says in this, of course, this Red Hat Linux that we are using in VDI only has Bash or KSH as login shells, so it's not possible to use CSH or anything like that. And the one that is going to be picked is the one that you set in your in your Unix account. So it's the same one. We have a page here that we list. It's also part of the documentation that lists all the software that we have installed, which is very limited. So it's but it's good maybe for you to know what is there, what is not. It's I would say it's basic flow UI, big things. There are browsers in case you need to access to any internet services. I think that's probably very common. But and then the most important thing is the terminal and going to. So as I mentioned before, the home and the perm file systems are both available both in VDI and in HPC. So it's just any file that you can copy. If you have an editor in the VDI, you can edit a file in the home, and of course it will be the same in the HPC because it's the same file system. But then if you want to share files or anything between your Linux VDI and your end user device, which is the system, the host system, your own laptop, your own desktop. No? I think there was a question in the chat I saw there, no, but so didn't say anything because we are coming to it. There's some way of doing some native file sharing between your local system and the Horizon client. So I will show that later. The default is that the home in your device is shared, but you can check that. I mean, you can share, of course, additional file systems if you want. So this here we have a demo how you could share a file between the HPC-F and VDI. But I think it won't work in HPC-F actually. It will work only in. I know. Sorry, this is the HPC-F, so this should be really the home thing. So it's not all permanent. So if we go to perm, we say hello from VDI. This is the VDI. Okay, we just created a file, and now, now something. So now we go to HPC login, and then we do the same thing. CD to perm, and voila, it's the same file is there. It's just demonstrating how the basically with the same file system. Copy one file from one place another. It's just you see the same thing, and then doing the same thing the other direction. Yeah. So this will happen either for the home file system or for the perm. As I said, they are NFS based. They're shared into those platforms. However, we also recommend you to use, when you're using maybe out of I/O from the in jobs that you run in the HPC, to use the file systems, the Lustre file systems, which are local to the HPC, that being HPC Perm or Scratch, because they will be a lot faster than these ones. Huh? These are based on NFS, so that the performance is definitely not as good as the Lustre ones. So it's that's of course your choice. There's something you want to see from both sides, from the VDI and from, then of course, but not out of I on that. Do on the home or Perm. If there's something that has a lot of I/O, and when you run your jobs in the HPC, then do use HPC Perm and Scratch. It will be a lot better. Yeah, so that's, we have the system documentation here. So again, as you can see here on the left-hand side, where it is in the menu. So this hopefully can answer many of your questions, and otherwise, yeah, we can always open a ticket through the support portal, and of course we'll try to help him. So, do we have any questions? Yeah, the data transfer, which I think Bojan already answered, but just to say that, yeah, there is this kind of option in VDesk on the Horizon client for sharing file systems that you have in your own desktop. And then those you can basically mark them as share. I think it's called drive sharing or something like that in the preferences of the tool, and those will show up in a TS client directory in your VDI. So there's some magic done there. So basically, if you're running the client on a Mac, you can see some of the Mac directories in VDI. That doesn't work from the HPC though. If you are if you go to the HPC, you will also see, because that TS client directory is in your home, but of course the HPC doesn't have the magic. We'll only see that. So it's a way of quickly sharing files. In my experience, it's a bit slowish because it's I don't know, but yeah, this is a possible option. Myself, I tend to use more just open also parallel TSH connection. And then SCP is really the fastest thing. If you have a single file to pass it from one place to another, or rsync even, and that really works quite well, in my experience. So yeah, so I don't know if you have any questions here. Yeah, I see some question here about the corporate firewall. I think we do have people using it through firewalls. Of course, it depends on the setting of the firewall. That's the key thing. No? But we do have. I think in any case, if we have problems for anyone in that situation, we better if they can contact us, and then we can see. We'll need to engage with their network administrators and see if there's anything that any port that is blocked. I think it's well documented in the Teleport website, what are the ports which are required, and also the same for VDI to establish connection. I think for VDI, there's always the web option. You can do desktops in the web.int and a web browser. In that case, you should only really need the 443 port for HTTPS. But that's yeah, it's a bit less featureful than the client. I think that myself is rather prefer using the client than the web browser for that. But anyway, it's an option. Then another configuration that we found some users have is this. Sometimes again, it's a bit less common and less supported, but we understand it works. Is so-called browserless configuration. No? Is if you are, for example, in an HPC system or a server that doesn't have any browser, so you may need to use that to be able to, because of course, as I mentioned, Teleport by default, when you do TSH login, will send you to a browser to that kind of login. So the browserless allows you to do the same process, but without using the browser. So that we have also in the documentation, you have the procedure, how to do that. And I believe it works okay. Of course, it depends on which environment you have, but this is another option. Yeah, so I don't know if we have any other questions here. Otherwise, if there aren't any questions, what we want to do now is to do, in this case, we don't have any specific practical, but we want you to try to set this. If you haven't already, than to just try to look at the documentation, just go through the whole process as described.